The idea, in some ways, is for the tremendous privilege that we get by meeting and speaking with people like you and His Holiness. Somehow we need to give something back for this, because it means a lot to our lives to begin with. But also then we have a duty to do something for the society if we get this kind of privilege. So part of the idea of the curriculum then is to spread out what we're learning and to encourage others to come into dialogue with us. One of the last things His Holiness said yesterday was the dialogue is one of the methods for developing and conveying values. So that's what we've done. We hope that it will be useful in some way, and the act of doing it is very useful to us. So we learn. So the students have some questions prepared.
Please.
But if you have any opening thoughts to convey.
I think let the questions come. Then at the end, if I have something to say, I will try to say.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Hi, my name is Bryson, and we know that you've been deeply involved in education for most of your life, and we met with His Holiness yesterday and discussed our project. We would like to know from your perspective, what are the core principles of a values-based education?
This is a very vast and deep question. I do not have any ready-made answer. We shall have to explore jointly. First of all, we shall have to define what we mean by education. From the Buddhist viewpoint, or from the traditional viewpoint, accumulation of information and education is something quite different. But in a modern society, education is almost identical with the inputs of information. And after inputs of information, then the person who is getting education do not have much homework to analyze them or to contemplate and open them and to make those informations for one's own knowledge. So therefore, the Buddhist people talk about three different kind of learning or wisdom. Learning from hearing or reading, learning from one's own analyzation and contemplation, and then finally learning from concentrative mind or meditation to realize the truth as a matter of perceiving, to perceive the reality. So we always think about education in these terms. And therefore, the Buddhist people talk about the threefold education. The threefold education is a part of one education. Without these three, you cannot complete an education. The first is the shila, that means the moral conduct or moral discipline. And then the second is concentrative mind, the samadhi, that means to control over your mind, make it able to work with full force on the one object. And the third is wisdom, the prajna. And you have the moral ethics in your life, and then you have the power of concentration from your meditative mind, and then your inner wisdom automatically comes out. That is the education. So in that way, education is inbuilt of all morality and ethics and all this. So thereby, then there's no need to add something as a teaching of morality or teaching of ethics apart from the regular courses of the education, the threefold way of education. But this is difficult to interpret in a modern language, not only modern language, in the modern behavior, in our modern behavior, how it can be. So we always think education as that of imparting information and knowledge which is acquired from reading or hearing or listening, that ends up the process of education. I think that is a little bit incomplete. So to define what is education is very important in the beginning. If we are able to define what is education, then all our process of inputting the information can be a little bit, little bit oriented to make it, to make some difference to the human mind. If the education could not help for majority of mind and calming the mind, then I think education is incomplete. So we have to find the ways and means how to make the education to make something difference of the mindset of the student. At this moment, our problem is, what I should say, just accumulation of information and then raw knowledge, unprocessed knowledge. And that unprocessed knowledge and great deal of information adds to your ego instead of diminishing the ego. And if education become aid to the ego and you become more arrogant and proud and less compassionate and less humble, then I think the education is going to the wrong direction. So to deal with your question, we shall have to define the education. And secondly, we shall also have to define the ethics and the values. In the Eastern language, the word value is not much used. We always use the ethics or the morality or the code of conduct. So I don't see the value is not important, but the different angles how we look to the points. So there are two different schools which I encounter in my practical life. Many people think, now I use the word value. Value is not a static. It always goes with the time, situation, society, requirement of human individuals. So value is changeable. And in that matter, then it becomes sometimes very difficult to define value. According to culture differences and according to time and situation and the country, if values are changeable, then we shall have to think values according to the time, space, and all this society. But from the Eastern viewpoint, the ethic principles are eternal. It is applicable to everyone. Because all the ethics are come back to the first grounding point is violence and no violence. any act which is directly or indirectly causes some violence or harm to others, living being, other sentient being, then that is considered to be unethical. And any action which does not cause directly or indirectly any harm or unhappiness to any other living being, any other sentient being, then that is not unethical. Any action which is beneficial to someone else, that is really ethical. So by this way, then the principle of harming, not harming, and benefiting, these are always remain static. It cannot be changed according to time or according to individual needs. But again here, this is possible that the definition of harm and not harming, and then again it goes back to the intention. Sometimes an act is apparently harming, but the intention is good and purpose is good, then it can be unharming action. So all these are very complex and complicated issue. So we shall have to explore it very patiently and issue by issue. Okay.
So we get into the deep end of the pool here, right? You can see the answers that we've been getting, how we have to really use our minds to go deeper into the questions rather than just have an easy answer, to go deeper and deeper into the questions. And from the Buddhist perspective, people spend their whole lives at this. You know, the depth is, from our perspective, hard to fathom. Yeah.
As His Holiness is always talking about dialogue, and it is very important. He always says the 21st century should be a century of dialogue. And dialogue, in our perception, it's too many different labels. Dialogue between nations, dialogue between governments for any specific differences or common interests. These are one kind of dialogue. And dialogue among the students on a specific subject. To make a joint inquiry into something, you have to do dialogue continuously. And dialogue with oneself, analyzing the subject so deeply, and you have to keep on dialoguing. So not, my late friend Jiddu Krishnamurti always used to say that don't be hurry to find a conclusion. Learn to live with the questions. And that is the that is really process of education. To find a conclusion which may be truthful or which may not be truthful, because human mind is always limitations. Our thought process is not unlimited. It has somewhere limitation. With awareness of that limitation, we have to keep on searching the truth. And the process of searching the truth is more important than finding the truth.
All right, I'm
Yes.
Amber. Through teaching Buddhist philosophy, it seems you have also been teaching ethics and human values. Do you believe that these values, which you taught through the Buddhist philosophy, can be effectively taught in a secular system or in a Western system that doesn't hold that same religious belief in their schools?
And there are different ways of looking at it. His Holiness is always talking about, when referring to the Buddhist teachings, he categorized three different classes or categories: Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist science, and Buddhist dharma, Buddhist religion. And he jokingly says Buddhist dharma is only the business of the Buddhists. And Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist science is common to all. even for the non-believers. To all religious followers or non-believers can learn the Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist science, because it deals with the ground reality. What is the matter and what is the component of matter? It's just like science. I was a teacher in Sarnath, now it is called Central University. During my time it was called Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies. And most of our subjects are Buddhist philosophy. Oh, thank you. Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist metaphysics. Then, of course, we are operating Indian university system. The UGC, Universities Grant Commission, is the central body in India which which oversees all the university system. And it was sometime in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a UNESCO report which recommends that higher education must include one people in the moral and value education. And the UGC decided to order to ask all the university institutions to add, open their own usual curriculum. 100-mark people should be introduced in the value education. And they have also decided some value education curriculum and syllabi. So I was the first person to refuse to introduce that that people. And all of my colleagues, the vice chancellors, they are very much unhappy. They told me that we did not expect, at least from you, a Buddhist monk, who oppose the value education. Then in our vice chancellor's conference, I asked them, it implies that we have to one particular people dealing with value to our curriculum. That means all other subjects we are teaching to the students are value-free, which does not deal anything with the value or moral system. If you say yes, then we can think about putting another people. Otherwise, you are teaching something which really deals with the human life and something value and ethics. Then it is it appears to me absurd to add a separate subject in this. We have to consider each subject should deal with the human value. It may be science.